Yeah, I'm not saying that. Call yourself whatever you want, join whatever you want, do whatever you want, as long as you're not harming other people. I'm just saying, if clicking a box that says you're an atheist is too high of a bar to get over to get into an atheist organization.
Yeah, it's not terribly restrictive.
Daniel in Pensacola, thanks for waiting.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good.
I wanted to tell Don, you
Okay.
better watch out. I'm watching this show. It seems like all the atheists are just going to lose their hair.
Well, I'm taking some drugs to prevent that, so that's probably what's saving me. Hooray for science.
Yeah, right. My main question beforehand, I wanted to touch on something Don had said about the Jewish. For all I know, I've heard that they go by the Old Testament. What's all this with the Jewish baby dick biting stuff? Like, when did that start, and why is it?
It's the circumcision process in Judaism,
Which is very old custom.
Yeah, a mole. It's the particular rabbi that performs the ceremony after doing the cut. You know, it could be that it bites up part of it. Yeah,
Brist on the web, and you'll find out about it.
Let me not finish the show by describing genital.
Nasty mouth on an open wound.
Yeah,
we did a whole show on circumcision.
That is the problem. First of all, I'm opposed to circumcision in general because I think it's a violation of individual freedoms. If it has any benefits, you can certainly wait until the kid is old enough to make the decision for themselves rather than doing it right after they're born. And I think the medical benefits are dubious at best. But at least if you're going to do it, let's not put some man's mouth down there to spread.
I know. Right?
I mean, if you go to medical school, I'm pretty sure one of the first things they tell you is not to gnaw open the torso to get to the kidney. So come on, let's just not be freaking stupid.
Right. No immune system.
And why not just sick the dogs on them and see which parts are left after they get done chewing?
Yeah. Well, herpes is very dangerous for an infant because they really have no defenses and can.
Everything is dangerous for an infant. They have no defenses.
Sure.
So why don't we freaking defend them from the idiots who are going to spit all over their... Never mind. All right, get to your question, Daniel.
What else you got for us, Daniel?
For tolerating my frustrations.
I had two questions. The first one was, I heard my brother's preacher saying that God was subject to His holiness, and it made me wonder. I started going through the tree and thinking, if He's subject to His holiness, does He really have free will, and is He more like a computer with a program behind Him?
Yeah, if God is restricted by His nature and cannot change His nature, if He is incapable of blah, 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 and can only do this, 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 and this, then does He have free will? Not under any definition I'm aware of, but I'm sure a theologian can tap dance their way around that.
Well, it makes me wonder, would people really praise and worship a computer program?
Sure.
Sure.
I spent most of yesterday doing it. Path of Exile was an awesome way to
There's a
spend the
similar
day.
problem with omniscience. If the God knows everything in the future, then He's sort of he knows how He will decide every possible thing and won't have free will at that point.
If He knows what He's going to eat for breakfast tomorrow, can He change His mind? If He knows He's going to eat eggs, is it possible for Him to ever eat bacon? And if not, then does He have free will at all? I mean, it's a separate issue from whether we have free will.
And if He has free will, then he can't have omniscience. So He's limited one way or another. So there's all sorts of problems
he can't
here.
Change, and he just never changes.
I know some theologians have argued, for example, that omniscience, in order to avoid one logical contradiction, is the characteristic of having all powerful that is logically possible. And they do a similar thing with omniscience, where God basically knows about all possibilities, but His actual knowledge of future events is as probabilistic as ours is. And I'm like, okay, so you guys just keep right on making God weaker, and it at least makes God a little more plausible. I mean, it's like somebody put kryptonite a little bit closer to God, so He's not completely shivering on the floor, but He can't quite jump as high or punch as hard.
Yeah.
So maybe God's a space alien.
Yeah.
There you
go.
Well, He is in Mormonism.
Right.
And Scientology, to the extent that there is.
By definition.
Yeah.
Anyway, you had one other thing?
The book of Revelation, I remember reading a part that said I have my own idea. It's almost a conspiracy theory to this point. It's the verse, I think it's almost exactly by the very end of it. It says that if you change or alter or take or remove any of the words of this book, all the curses of the book will be upon you. I was wondering about how people can not take it at first face value and actually believe horses are going to ride in from the sky and monsters from the sea. And if they do interpret, is that not adding to the words and going a step further than you don't really have to, and maybe cursed with all the curses of it?
So here's the problem. You're way smarter than the authors of the book and most theologians. And I think you're referring to Revelation 22, verses 18 and 19, which says, "For I testify unto," and I'm reading this, I didn't have this memorized, but I knew about it. I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. And basically, that verse is not specifically about interpreting. It's about modifying the text. It's about going in and putting in interpolations, like you might find in Mark chapter 16, verses 9 through 20, or the Jonan comma that actually defines the Trinity. Those are apparently additions, as is the story of the adulteress. These are generally considered to be late interpolations or additions to the text. And the problem is that when this stuff was written, we were transferring from a time where almost everything was passed by oral tradition from person to person to more of a written tradition. And as soon as this started, one of the things that there were forgeries rampant. I am Paul speaking on behalf of God, and it's so bad that and I forget which book it is that Paul wrote, or Paul supposedly wrote, at the end of it, or maybe at the beginning, he says, "I say all these things so that you will know that I am actually Paul and not somebody else writing." That's paraphrasing it. But it's basically, this book is definitely not a forgery, which lets you know a couple things, that there were a lot of forgeries running around, and that book may well be a forgery, because the first thing a forger is going to do is say, "Hey, I'm not lying to you, this is the real thing."
It's not much of a guarantee, really.
And so when Revelation was written, words like this were common. It was the idea that we're presenting a religious, something that is coming supposedly from divine inspiration from God, and if you alter this in any way to add your personal, little peccadillos to it, God's going to mess you up. And
well, isn't it kind of like saying that if it says dragon's going to come out of the sea, and you say, "Oh, that's a kingdom somewhere," isn't that practically the same thing?
So one could argue that even under the most literal understanding of these verses, that any preacher that's written a book that expounds on Scripture might have violated this verse. There's a bunch of different Bible translations. I mean, you can go to BibleGateway.com and compare a lot of them. And there are people who say that the 1411 King James Version is God speaking in the original King's Own English, and that the New International Version is an abomination, and that the people who wrote the NIV are violating this passage and others. But I'm going to let them sort all that out, because I think it's all bullshit no matter what language it's in.
Hey, can I tell you about the conspiracy I made up out of it real quick?
Sure.
I was talking to my brother, and it came up to this, and he's one that believes that the Bible is a living word and that it applies to everything, all the other books. So when it says to this book, it means to the Bible, per se.
Yeah.
So I was just like, man, all throughout the Bible it's saying trust God, trust God, trust God. And then you get to this crazy, I know, crazy, right? But the very end is really crazy. It starts giving you dragons coming out of here, giant horrors all around, and it kind of gives you a pop quiz at the very end. If you accidentally didn't, like a final test, it says trust God, and then at the very end, if you don't trust God and you start guessing, you couldn't have meant a real dragon coming out of the water, you kind of failed the test, and it lets you know, hey, you're now going to get cursed, but for not
for buying the other
stuff. Right.
Yeah,
being in faith yet.
It's a difficult thing, because there are some things that are pretty clearly metaphor, and there are some things that are not so clearly metaphor. Did Balaam really talk, or have an ass that talked to him? Who knows? I'm going to say no, but I wasn't there, so how could I know? I'm just
So
I'm
it's endless hours of wasting your time, my opinion.
I'm using inductive reasoning and the fact that I'm not aware of any donkeys that can actually speak.
But Matt, were you there?
I was not there. And I don't know that I'm not a brain in a vat, so what the hell am I going to do? Anyway, thanks for the call, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.